When it comes to investing, many people think that you need a lot of money to get started. Now, maybe this used to be the case decades ago, but with the advancement of technology, you no longer need a ton of cash to get started with investing. And for anyone that's interested in getting started with investing, this is good news, right? Because investing is absolutely crucial to building long-term wealth and taking control of your financial future. So for those that have little money and aren't sure how to get started, in this video, I'm going to break down how you can get started investing with little money. So let's first start off with the basics of investing, right? I think we all understand that when it comes to investing, like investing is essential for building long-term financial success, right? Whether you're investing in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or even real estate, we understand that investing needs to be a part of the financial plan. But I think for a lot of people, whether it's due to lack of knowledge or fear, or maybe lack of money, they tend not to get started with it, right? But it's important to understand that there's ways of mitigating that risk, like that, making sure that your portfolio is diversified, right? Which is something we'll get into later. But you want to make sure, if you want to mitigate the risk, make sure your portfolio is diversified, and you don't have to worry about the risk. So it's important to understand that, because I know that stops a lot of people from getting started, right? And it's also important to understand that there's many successful investors that started with little money. So don't let lack of money or lack of knowledge like deter you from actually like getting started, right? It just requires a little bit of education and doesn't require a lot of money, but just understanding the basics in terms of like, there's different tools or different types of investment tools that you can invest in that doesn't require a lot of money. So now that we got the basics down, right, the next thing you want to do is start creating a budget and saving for your investment. And I know for a lot of people, when they hear the word budget, they're like, they get turned off and they really want to hear it. But it's absolutely crucial that you do this, because you need to understand, you need to track your finances, right? You need to know what's available to invest, right? Because we always talk, you hear people talk about, making sure you pay yourself first. And what they mean by that is that you want to make sure you pay yourself first so that you can use that money to invest, right? But it's important to create a budget so you have an idea of like what you can invest, right? Because I always recommend making sure you pay yourself first, and then whatever's left, you use that to pay down your expenses. But in order to do that, you want to make sure you have a budget. You have a clear view of like what your finances look like, what income is coming in, expenses going out, and then you can figure out how much you can take out to use to invest, right? And because for a lot of people, especially when you're dealing with a tight budget, you don't have a lot of money to use to invest, you need to make sure exactly like tracking your income, tracking your expenses, so you have an idea what's left over, so you can then invest in the stock market, right? So you want to make sure, obviously, once you do that, you want to make sure you're cutting all the unnecessary expenses, right? You want to make sure you're automating your savings. You want to make sure you put it on automate and make sure you're like, all right, you have everything, where everything is going, and you make sure you automate your savings. And obviously, the next thing is you also want to make sure you're building an emergency fund, right? Because the last thing you want to do is, like, let's say that things do get tight, and as you're investing, you're putting money in the stock market, and let's say an emergency comes up, you don't want to then have to dip into your investment account to pay for that emergency, right? You want to make sure you have that emergency fund, so therefore, if anything pops up, you can use that emergency fund to pay it off, right? Instead of dipping into your investment portfolio. Something I've done before, and that's something I never want to do again. So you want to make sure you're realistic about your savings goal, right? And make sure you develop a disciplined savings habit, right? Make sure that every time you get paid, like I said, cut your expenses so you know what's coming in, what's going out, and then you're paying yourself first, and you can use that money to then invest, right? So once you have a broad picture, like right in front of you, like what's going on with your finances, it makes it easier to invest in long term. So now the next thing is researching investment options, and I know for a lot of people this is like kind of difficult, because it's like it requires a lot of time and effort, and it doesn't require as much time as you think it does. Obviously, going to require a little bit, right? You're going to educate yourself a little bit, but when you're getting started with investing in, like, especially in stocks, you want to make sure you get started. I always recommend that people get started with like index funds, right? Because index funds compared to like individual stocks doesn't require as much research, right? And also not only that, but it doesn't have as much risk, right? But like if you're investing in an individual stock, that means you have to understand what that company is about. You got to do a lot of research, look at their balance statements and all that. But with an index fund, all you're doing is just basically looking at, obviously it tracks the stock market, so it requires less research for a lot of people. And I think for many people, you would hear this, that index funds is a great way for beginners to get started in investing in the stock market, because it doesn't require that much risk, right? You don't have to worry about like you investing in stock, and if the market goes down and the company goes out of business, you lose all your money. So for a lot of people, I would recommend getting started with index funds, and as you develop the education and the knowledge, then you can like transition and probably start implementing like individual stocks. But in the beginning, I would just recommend index funds, and as you develop the knowledge, the experience, and the understanding of how the stock market works, if you want to delve into individual stocks, then you can do that. So the next thing is starting small and letting that money grow over time. I think for a lot of us, and I spoke to this earlier, is that we think we need a lot of money to get started with investing, right? We need like, oh man, I need a few dollars before I start investing. That holds a lot of people back from actually getting started. So they're like, oh, I need like $1,000, $2,000 in order to get started. You really don't need that. You can start with a $10, $20, $100, whatever you have. You want to make sure you're getting started, building that habit, right? Even if it's like I said, $10, get that money and put that into the stock market and let that compound over time, right? Obviously, it's not gonna make you rich overnight, but it's something. It's just making sure you're developing the habit, get into the habit of investing, and then over time, as you obviously increase your income, or you're able to reduce your expenses, then you can increase the amount that you invest in over time. And like I think the most important thing is you want to be consistent with it, right? You don't want to make like, oh, it's $10 today or $10 this week, and then nothing the following week. You want to make sure you're consistently doing that, and a good way to do that is through like dollar cost averaging, right? Like every month, you're investing in the stock market, whether it's $20 a month, whether it's $100 a month. You want to make sure you're consistently doing that every month. You don't want to deviate from that, right? You want to be like one month is 100 and the next month is nothing, right? You want to try to be as consistent as possible, and dollar cost average makes it easier to do that. And whatever you can afford, that's what you can give. As long as you're doing it, as long as you're developing that habit, get into the habit of investing, you'll see as time goes on, you'll be able to increase that amount. Because usually, like they usually recommend 15-20% of your income to invest in the stock market, but some people invest more than that depending on how much you make. So obviously, start with like 5% of your income, whatever it is, whatever you can use, whatever you can put in. Get started, right? Because you want to make sure that money is compounding over time. Because the earlier you start, the better you'll be, right? And as you grow, as you make more money, you become better with your finances. Then you can increase the amount of percentage that you invest in the market. So now we have choosing the right investment accounts, right? And for this one, there's so many different accounts that we can like get into. But for this one, we're just going to talk about when it comes to retirement, right? Obviously, you want to focus on retirement. You want to make that a part of your investment strategy. So you want to make sure you're discussing, obviously, getting involved with. Obviously, if you have a job, then you want to get into like 401k retirement accounts, IRAs, if you can do that. And you need to understand that because there's so many like different tax advantage accounts whether depending on which one you choose, whether you can pay taxes up front or you can pay that after you're retired. And obviously I'm not a financial planner, so I can't really like recommend which one is best for you. So I would definitely speak to a professional about that. But it's definitely like important to make sure that you're choosing the right account depending on your financial goals, right? And then also you want to account for fees because there's different fees for different accounts when choosing a platform. So you want to make sure this is all these things that you like go over and try to really understand, because making sure that you pick the right account for you is going to be crucial for obviously your long-term success when it comes to your finances. Next, you want to manage risk and stay informed, right? And this is obviously crucial when it comes to investment, because obviously you want to make sure that you're doing the right things in order to make sure you're building wealth long-term successfully. And obviously the best way to do that is for those that are afraid of risk is making sure your portfolio is diversified, right? This helps manage risk for anyone that's afraid. Well, you want to make sure, obviously, speak to someone. Obviously, I can't give you the recommendation on how to diversify your portfolio, but you want to make sure it's diversified because this helps mitigate the risk. And like I said, ETFs are a great, like index fund ETFs are a great way to diversify that portfolio. So obviously, making sure your portfolio is diversified helps manage risk. And then obviously, when it comes to like your portfolio, you want to make sure you're reviewing your portfolio and making sure you're rebalancing your investments when necessary, right? And usually they recommend, like, some people do it every 6 months. Some people do it like every year, because you don't want to be on there every month, right? Because I remember when I started investing, I was looking at my portfolio like every day, every month, and you don't want to do that because obviously the way the stock market fluctuates and how volatile it is, like it can drive you crazy. So something you want to do is like at the minimum every month, but like when it comes to like reviewing your portfolio, rebalancing, usually people recommend anywhere from like 6 months to a year. So you want to make sure you're staying on top of that. And also, when it comes to like making sure you stay informed, like stay informed through like obviously making sure that you're reading books, right? Reading financial newsletters, books, webinars, whatever it is, to make sure you're staying up to date when it comes to the investment market, and just to make sure that you're staying and you continue to educate yourself, because obviously there's a lot to learn. So you want to make sure you're constantly educating yourself and making sure you're staying informed, right? And just don't be afraid of expanding your knowledge, right? Because this is a vast world when it comes to the finances, and we all want to make sure that we understand. And if you get to a point where you probably need a financial planner, that's something you can get into in the future if it, depending on your situation. So you want to make sure you're managing your risk and staying informed. So my final thoughts on this, right? It's obviously, when it comes to investing, the most important thing is making sure you start early, and you want to make sure you're being consistent, right? This is for anyone, depending on whatever age you are, it doesn't really matter. But if you're someone that's young, you want to make sure you start early, and you want to make sure you're consistent with your investment. You don't want to be someone that's like investing today and then tomorrow and then you wait for a year from now the way you want to do it. You want to make sure you're investing consistently, and understand that it doesn't matter how much money you have, right? Anyone can get started regardless of your financial situation, as long as obviously you want to make sure that you've eliminated debt, you have your emergency fund in place, and that's the best time to do it. If you're someone that's racked up in debt, your best return is not going to be in the stock market. It's getting rid of that consumer debt, because credit cards have 15 to 25% interest rate. Your best return would be to make sure you eliminate that first before you decide to invest in the stock market. So, but once you've done that, then obviously you make sure you want to get started, right? And anyone can get started regardless of income. It's just make sure you're being consistent and developing that habit. And obviously take action, right? Make sure you understand, educate yourself, understand the investment accounts, different options, and just make your first investment. Like, there's so many different tools for you to get started that make it very easy, man. You can get started with $5, $10, $20. It doesn't really matter. So just understand that you do have an opportunity to change your financial future. And obviously, like, the best thing to do is obviously invest long term, right? That's the best way to do it. And you'll see that once you get into that habit, you'll have a better understanding, and you have a better idea of like where you are financially, and how you have the fact that you can, your financial future and the health of your financial future is right there in your grasp, that you can do it. So that's all I got for you guys today. If you got any comments or questions, make sure to leave it down below. Hit the like button, share, and if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe. All right, so you guys take care and have a good one. Later.